Welcome to this, the first of 4 conversations which will take place over the coming weeks between The Guardian and our sister papers across Europe, all taking part together in this special season on Europe. Today it's a conversation between me, Jonathan Freedland from The Guardian, and my colleague Matussek, who is a cultural commentator for Der Spiegel, our partner in Germany. Both Prime Minister David Cameron of Britain and Chancellor Angela Merkel of Germany have in recent weeks or months pronounced multiculturalism to have failed, utterly failed, in Chancellor Merkel's words. So Matussek, welcome. We're being connected by computer technology, speaking to each other in real time, as it were. How do you understand, sitting in Germany, multiculturalism?
Multiculturalism is the living or coming together of different ethnicities in one country, sharing this country and sharing the laws of this country, obeying the laws of this country, and nevertheless living their own culture, their distinctive cultures. Having lived myself in New York and London and Berlin, I came to believe that multiculturalism is a very inspiring thing to have. When religion comes into play, it always gets very tricky. In Germany, especially in Berlin, we have a situation where you have whole quarters, whole sections of the city practically sealed off, and who's running the show are mostly people from the religious community and with their own set of rules, which aren't the rules of an enlightened society, which are the rules of the Sharia and so on. And we don't want to see that.
My definition would be in many ways very similar to yours, and I'm very struck by the fact that both of us have lived as correspondents, I think, in the United States. And I'm sure that informs our thinking. But how I would describe it is, on the one hand, it says to different ethnic or religious minorities, you are allowed to value and celebrate your own heritage and culture. And therefore, if you are of Turkish origin in Germany, you don't have to pretend you're not. You don't have to change your name and hide your customs. But it also says, on the other hand, that you are part of this wider society, that you're part of Britain, in Britain's case, or America or Germany. And I think what happens in America is they're very good at emphasizing both sides of that hyphen. So you are both Italian and American. You're allowed to celebrate your Italian heritage, but you never forget you're American. You are Italian-American. And what I want in Britain is for people to remember both sides of that hyphen. And in our hurry to welcome some ethnic minorities here in Britain, I think, people placed huge emphasis on one half of that equation, but not the other. And I'm slightly worried by Chancellor Merkel and actually Cameron, Prime Minister Cameron, saying the whole thing has failed, rather than saying, what I would like to hear from them, let's just get the emphasis right. One half of the hyphen is being overemphasized, perhaps, the other half underemphasized. Let's get them back in balance rather than throwing out the whole equation.
The debate has a long tradition in Germany. It started off with the central banker Sarrazin and his book, Germany is Doing Away with Itself. It's a very outspoken summary of the costs of immigration in certain quarters, especially of Berlin. Practically the whole political and journalistic establishment came to the conclusion that he was an anti-democrat. And he became sort of a matter of opinion. As a journalist, I must say, I didn't like that onslaught on somebody who spoke his mind. This is democratic freedom. And so that started a whole debate. What is strange, though, is that Angela Merkel came out 4 weeks later with her remark that multiculturalism has failed, which is far more radical than what Sarrazin has said. So she wanted, on the one hand, have him thrown out of the debate. On the other hand, offering herself as the front figure for all those who are dissatisfied with immigration.
There is, isn't there not, a long history in Europe of precisely that manoeuvre, so that Jacques Chirac will denounce Jean-Marie Le Pen and then take on board some of Le Pen's ideas. And Margaret Thatcher did the same in Britain when there was a far-right party, the National Front, the same name as Le Pen's party, in fact. She took in 1979 some of their rhetoric and some of their themes. So this has a long history. It seems to me the tone of Sarrazin's comments and others who've echoed him is to blame these minorities for, in some ways, their own hardship. In other words, to say to them, communities which may well be through lack of opportunity or even, dare we say it, racism and prejudice, maybe are underachieving in school and in employment, to somehow blame them, to suggest that they are deliberately having their children do worse at school and deliberately in poverty, and then obviously related problems involving crime, etc.
He's blaming them, of course, for the lack of ambition, but he's also blaming the system, the political system, for putting out a wrong system of incentives. It is more rewarding sometimes for certain groups of families just to stay at home and cash in whatever the government is offering you if you're unemployed and so on. They even send money from that part back to their home countries. It's a wrong system of incentives on the political part. Obviously also on the part of the immigrants, a lack of ambition and alternative ways of trying to make money, and which is often in a shadow economics. If you put up that problem, you are labeled as a racist or as a anti or what have you. I was correspondent in London, and I was there when the subway bombing happened. The thing that shocked British society was to learn that the bombing was done by immigrants of second and third generation in Leeds, of people, of youngsters who used to live there and who were supposed to be one of us. They're one of us. And they're still harboring an enormous hate against the society they're living in, and to sacrifice 50 people. And that was a shock to the British society.
And it was something that led me to, on my own writing on multiculturalism, to shift some of the emphasis and to realise that while we had put so much emphasis on going back to my hyphenated identity, that we had put too much, or not too much, but we had put so much emphasis on one half, saying to British Asians or British Jews or British Black Britons or any other group, celebrate your ethnic identity or your minority identity. We had in some ways failed to put all equal emphasis, or we had taken as read, we had assumed that people would feel strongly about their British identity. And I made the case there that we needed to put some positive encouragement there to make those things more in balance. But the way to do that, it seems to me, is to make it positive. And just to throw it back to Germany one more time, I know you've been having there a debate, triggered, it seems, by the president, the ceremonial figure in your country, President Wolf, who said that Islam is, and always has been, if you like, part of Germany. And then your Interior Minister, Friedrich, coming back and saying, actually, Islam is not part of Germany. And Matthias, I see in your own writing, if you've been translated correctly, the final line in your article is, and no, Islam is not an intrinsic part of Germany. Now, to my ears, hearing that seems to me not an effective way to win over, to warmly persuade some of these minorities who, as you've said, are living at the moment in their own neighbourhoods. That doesn't seem a way to encourage them to become part of Germany more.
What the Minister for Interior Affairs said, that the Islam is not historically in the German DNA, if you so will. And there he is right. The Islam has not a forming impact in German culture. Everybody can agree on that. What was done again was to say, this is very this is very hostile, and it causes it's an inflammatory speech, and so on and so on. Nobody stick to the point of really getting the historical facts straight. And there I jumped in and said, come on, listen, we talk about history here. Islam is not part of German history. Everybody can agree on that. Let me point one thing out to when you mentioned Sarrazin. Sarrazin is not against any immigration at all. He makes a very strong point in his book that there are other ethnic groups like the Asians, like the Russians, like Pakistanis, Indians, and so on, who are very, very supportive and productive in the society, who are defining themselves as part of the society and who are very welcomed. The problem is the religion. It's a very, very militant religion, and we have to. And it's a religion that wants to put away with the state of Israel. Ahmadinejad wants to do away with Israel, and we cannot tolerate. We cannot tolerate a religion that is in contradiction to the set of beliefs we believe in since the Enlightenment: equal rights for women. It's not right to beat your kids up. It is not right to cut the hands off if somebody steals things. It's not right, and we need to be very aware. And that's nothing else is what I am saying. And everybody who is pointing the attention to that problems is labeled a racist.
What troubles me, and you've done it in our conversation now, and it's also in your article, is I think you move, and you're not the only one to do this, very freely between Islam and militant and violent jihadism. You and I agree completely that violent jihadism is a problem, a huge problem. It is unacceptable. It should be challenged. And both of us would be very happy to know that our intelligence services are putting under surveillance those people who are plotting violent jihadism or takfirism. Some of the is the words sometimes used. A creed which would
violent Islamism.
Well,
it's the same Quran that they're reading. It's Islamism.
No, well, hold on. I mean, you're then in between that could be a form of political Islam, still under the name Islamism, which is non-violent. I mean, the politics in Turkey, the majority governing party would describe itself as Islamist without being necessarily jihadist in the sense of violent and terroristic. But then you make a bridge not just from jihadism to Islamism, which is more a grey area, but to Islam itself. And so you describe it as a militant religion in your art, and you've done it twice in our conversation just now, but in your article as well, you say, is this the Islam of the 14th century poet, or is this the Islam that deprives women of their rights, which I think is a point you're making there about the religion, or the one that uses bombs to make political statements? I think it's crucially important to say a handful of Muslims who are, it seems, using a corrupted, bastardized version of their religion are using bombs to make political statements. But to suggest that this is the view of the entire religion is to make an enemy of the 4 million Muslims I think you have in Germany, or the 2 million Muslims that are in Britain, rather than making an enemy of the couple of hundred known jihadist extremists.
Even in the wonderful democratic rebellion we see in the Arab countries right now, you have to be aware that the majority of the Egyptians are still in favor of stoning wives if they commit adultery, of amputating the right arm if you commit thievery, and of the penalty of death if you fall off from the Islam. That's the majority. It's a Pew poll that was taken shortly before Mubarak was done away with. There are strong Orthodox and fundamentalist movements in Gaza, in Jordan, in Bahrain, all over. And if the Turkish Prime Minister comes to Germany for an election campaign, and he swears in his followers or people who come to see him not to assimilate to Germany, but stick to their roots, And then you have an interior minister who says, obviously, lots of Islamic it doesn't belong to Islamic culture doesn't belong to Germany, and the people are crying foul. I cannot understand it.
Of course, you and I would both be on the same side about the hope that the revolutions in the Arab world lead to a flowering of democracy and enlightened values, rather than a response to that kind of literalist Islam and with the kind of punitive connotations you mentioned. We would agree on that. But we're talking mainly about Europe, and these are minorities who are not going to be able to, even if some of them want to convert Germany or Britain to Sharia law. That is not on the cards, and therefore there's no kind of prospect. I also think the work of many scholars in this country to craft a kind of new European Islam. You know about Tariq Ramadan, a controversial figure, but there are others who are trying to say there will be a new and rooted version of Islam wholly compatible with enlightened values, and I think that's something we should want and support, and again I think we would agree on that. But the last point I wanted to mention, because you brought us back to the Interior Minister, he made there a historical point, and you're saying you can't dispute the history. If, Matthias, he was a historian sitting in Heidelberg University and made that point, I think neither of us would have any problem with it. The problem is he's the Interior Minister, and therefore he's not making a purely academic point. It is quite charged and loaded if an Interior Minister turns round and says, you have no historic place in this country. You cannot help but feel he's making a point about the present as well. We had a similar thing in our country. The equivalent of the Interior Minister, the Home Secretary of the time, said he didn't like it when constituents, women he represented, came to him with their faces covered in the niqab, traditional Muslim garb. Now, he could have made that point, but the fact that he was the Home Secretary, a senior figure in the government, it felt like a threat to Muslim religious practices, rather than the kind of debate we would have had if he had been occupying a different position. I'm afraid, Matthias, I'm giving myself the last word. That's terribly unjust. But we've had a very spirited conversation, just the first of many, I hope, in this new partnership flowering between The Guardian and Der Spiegel and other sister publications across Europe. So Matthias Matussek in Germany, Jonathan Freedland here in Britain. We're going to have to end it there and say goodbye. Thanks for watching.
Bye, Jonathan.